It was more just the defeatism in his eyes and in his tone. And it reminded me of like those George W. Bush years where there was just kind of an exasperation that we had to kind of surrender to the frame of the media or the powers that be, and that we didn't have the ability to go and carve out our own destiny. And I saw that in him at the time. We put forward arguments and affidavits and evidence. We showed him videos. We were in the cabinet room meeting with Mike Pence in the days leading up to January 6th. And I left quite disappointed that he was not motivated by our argument.
Just a quick fact check, David Jolly. There was no evidence. There were arguments, but there was no evidence presented to Mike Pence of fraud, which is why Mike Pence did not vote to overturn the election. I want you, David Jolly, to take me through what this means if Republicans line up behind this nomination and confirm Gates. I mean, and let me just put up a couple of the statistics of what the Department of Justice does. 1,912 people were referred to the U.S. attorneys for human trafficking offenses in 2022. The number of people prosecuted for human trafficking more than doubled from 2012 to 2022, from 805 to 1,656. That includes the Trump years. It's something that was getting more effective and successful even during his presidency. 115,000 people work at the department. And this is the crime statistic that Trump is inheriting. Quote, homicides continue to decline in major U.S. cities by more than 40% in some communities during the first 9 months of the year, according to new data that show the COVID-era crime wave evaporating. Just take me through the stakes for Republicans if they line up behind Matt Gaetz.
Sure. Well, first of all, those are all statistics that Matt Gaetz probably has no idea because, as Mary said, he's completely and wholly unqualified for the position of being the nation's top prosecutor. And though I do think this election really sealed the permanence of Trumpism in the country as a movement, as well as for the party, if it wasn't already there, this is kind of the first test vote of that permanence. And because the stakes are so high and because the level of unfitness of Matt Gaetz is also so high, I'm still naive enough to think that this may not go through. I mean, this would be a Kavanaugh hearing on steroids. And I don't think the House Ethics Committee will release the report. I think Mike Johnson signaled to the members yesterday when he said we shouldn't do this. None of them are going to do that because they're waiting for their next promotion for Mike Johnson sometime in the next 6 weeks. But at this hearing, we could see all types of information come forward. First of all, if Matt Gaetz really thinks this is weaponized, he could ask for the ethics report to be released. He could ask for the FBI files to be released. Senate Democrats have asked the FBI to release their evidentiary information on this. The other wild card here is Susan Wild, who we just heard from. She just lost her Pennsylvania seat. She'll be a private citizen in January. The Democrats ask her to come testify about what she knows. The attorney for the women. This is going to get very white hot, not just for Matt Gaetz, who has shown he doesn't care, but for those Senate Republicans that you're talking about. And the ones I'm most curious about, outside of Mitch McConnell, who now has nothing to care about, right? He doesn't care about what Donald Trump says about him. He notionally is going to be concerned about his legacy and probably a hatred for Matt Gaetz somewhere. But what about those members with House experience, maybe even some who served with Matt Gaetz? And I'm thinking of people we don't often talk about. Bill Cassidy from Louisiana, Tim Daines of Montana, certainly Markwayne Mullins of Oklahoma. But you have a whole list of House members that some of them very close with Kevin McCarthy, who both have the personal disdain for Gaetz, but also know he's unfit. This is going to get messy fast. And we know Vance is already working the Hill on behalf of his boss, but what does Donald Trump do? And I don't know that this goes through. I don't know if there are 4 Republicans or not, but it will be a dark day if Matt Gaetz heads the Department of Justice, wholly unqualified, and he will be there for one reason. It is because he truly will do whatever Donald Trump asks. From the very beginning of Trumpism, Matt Gaetz has been the lackey that will execute on any wish of the president. Donald Trump wants to prosecute his enemies list. Matt Gaetz has said, yes, sir, I'll do it. Donald Trump will now do anything it takes to get Matt Gaetz in that position.
I want to peel the layers back a little bit deeper with you, David Jolly. I mean, I agree that if Donald Trump wants this to happen, this will happen. That is the Republican Party that we've been covering and talking about and watching for 9 years. They're as predictable as the ants that take the crumbs and make the hill, and that's what they always do. There are no new stories in Republican politics. What's interesting to me, what I'm watching, is to see if anyone around Trump is savvy enough to understand that the reason Trump wants to prosecute his enemies is because he still smarts from the specter of criminality that hung over his first term. And does he really want the specter of criminality to hang over the guy that's going to avenge the specter of criminality that hung over his first term? I mean, Gates is everything that Trump ran to avenge, encapsulated in a 24/7 scandal news cycle. He doesn't make Trump look like, I mean, Trump believes that the investigations turn him into a martyr. I mean, Trump using Gates to prosecute his enemies is basically running the presidential campaign of the person that beats Trumpism next time. It's literally the inverse of what Trump thinks he's doing by sticking Matt Gaetz there. Do you think anyone can have that conversation with him?
Well, as you would well know, Susie Wiles. I think Susie Wiles was probably surprised by this pick, but now has a plan B, C, and D around this. But Donald Trump also, I think, to your point, though, we have to recognize Donald Trump is someone with no personal convictions. He has criminal convictions, but no personal convictions. And so it doesn't really matter to him if he nominates somebody without personal convictions, and even somebody with a potential criminal conviction, though the case against Matt Gaetz obviously concluded with no charges filed. And so I actually think he is such an amoral leader that none of this actually matters. I mean, Chuck Todd in the previous hour had a fascinating insight that Donald Trump is kind of putting his people in the four corners. Over at HHS, where he feels like he was sunk by COVID, he's looking at Justice and FBI. He's looking at the different departments where he feels like he was misled by what he considers the deep state. And so now his retribution is to put his people where he wants them. I just don't know that the Senate goes along with the Matt Gaetz one. All of the others, if I were to play devil's advocate, I think on Hegseth, remarkably unqualified, but Senate Republicans wrap themselves in the flag and say he has 20 years of military service. They overlook everything else, and they've got the votes to put him through. Tulsi Gabbard will have an explanation for meeting with Assad. They'll put her through. All the other picks, they will put through. This one, there's no redeeming quality to this pick. There's no redeeming quality to Matt Gaetz. There's no agenda that Matt Gaetz brings to the department other than the enemies list agenda. And it is unsettling for Republican senators to have to vote on somebody who we're going to learn a lot more from. I mentioned the FBI files could be available. Susan Wild could be available. Matt Gaetz, his own testimony will be damning. But recall the Kavanaugh testimony when we all went looking for Squee, his buddy, his college buddy. There are a lot of squeeze in Matt Gaetz's world. I mean, this investigation took down a lot of people in Florida, one now serving time in prison for sex
Joel
trafficking.
Greenberg, yeah.
And the others who lost their jobs, lost their professional standing in Florida because they were within the blast radius of Matt Gaetz. I still am not convinced that even in a Trump GOP, Matt Gaetz gets through. I hope I'm right, but history has proven me wrong, probably.
It is a fascinating new sort of sociological experiment. You know, where is the bottom? Is it above or below the Matt Gaetz line?